In 1 Samuel chapter 18, the previous chapter, things have really begun to heat up between Saul and David. After David's defeat of Goliath, David and Jonathan became best of friends. And if Jonathan was anyone else, that wouldn't even be worth mentioning. But Jonathan's not just anyone else. Jonathan is the son of the king of Israel, Saul. And that is a problem because Saul hates David and has declared David to be his mortal enemy. I suppose that was not obvious to everyone yet. Saul may have well concealed his hatred for David. Saul's attempts on David's life, maybe those were covert enough that no one really knew what Saul was up to here. But chapter 9 is where all of that changes. Chapter 19 is where all of that changes. In 1 Samuel chapter 19, Saul decides to be concealed and covert no longer. He decides to come out in the open with his hatred for David and with his desire to have David killed. And he will enlist as much help as he can get toward the end of eliminating David from the earth forever. So we read in chapter 19 of 1 Samuel, verse 1, "And Saul spoke to Jonathan his son, and to all his servants, everyone on Saul's staff, that they should kill David." Now I wonder if they were given the opportunity to ask questions at that staff meeting, because I think everyone would want to know, what now? We're killing David? All of a sudden, why exactly are we killing David? Let's see, David is model citizen. He is our greatest soldier. He's our greatest officer. Don't forget, he single-handedly delivered us from the giant problem that we recently had. So why exactly is it that we're killing David? What could this man have possibly done that was so wrong that now we're all deciding that we're going to kill David? Well, I'm sure they didn't get a chance to ask those questions. For sure, if they did ask those questions, they wouldn't have been given a truthful answer from Saul, because it would have to be something like this. Well, David's better than me, and everyone likes David better than me, and that's just not going to fly, so David has to go. We have to kill him. I need to be the most popular person in all of Israel. I need to be the most loved person in all of Israel. I can't let that be David. So the issue here obviously is jealousy. Jealousy is very ugly and quite dangerous. We talked about that at length in a recent study. The jealousy has probably killed more people in the history of the world than just about anything else. So again, learn from Saul not to harbor jealousy. If you have jealousy in your heart for another person, seek God's help with that and deal with that until it is purged from your heart. You really need that gone. Jealousy is like anger that can turn to hatred. There's a root there, the root of bitterness. Bitterness creeps in. It ends up producing an entire tree, and a very ugly tree with very ugly fruit in your life. Jealousy is the same way. If you just let that ride, big problems are ahead. So let the Lord deal with that. As soon as you recognize it, Lord, why am I jealous toward this other person? Help me with that jealousy. Take that out of my heart. I'm going to keep praying about that. I'm going to keep asking you, Lord, until I know for sure that it's gone. So Saul spoke to Jonathan and his sons and to all his servants that they should kill David, reading on in verse 1. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. So Jonathan is conflicted, of course. Saul has declared a personal war against David, and Jonathan now has to make a decision on who he is going to back in this situation. On the one hand, blood is thicker than water, but on the other hand, right is still right and wrong is still right. So if you're Jonathan, do you throw your support to Saul just because that's dad, he's family, he's kin, you got to support family? Or do you do the right thing and support and defend the innocent man? David is sentenced to death here. He's been given a conviction of execution when he's done absolutely nothing wrong. Do you support that guy? Do you do right? Or are you there for family? What's going to be your call in that situation? Well, it's a tough decision if you're family. For everyone else, this is a really easy decision. Of course, you're going to do what's right. You're going to support the innocent guy. And I think we know enough about Jonathan's character already to already know what Jonathan is going to do in this situation. Jonathan is going to do the right thing, regardless of the personal risk or cost. He's going to do the right thing here. And it all starts with this, verse 2. And Jonathan told David, so he squealed, he told David what was happening. He said, Saul, my father, seeks to kill you. Therefore, be on your guard in the morning. Stay in a secret place and hide yourself. And folks, that pretty much sums up David's life for the next 7+ years. This is what David's going to be doing for a long time to come. He's going to be looking, with a real brief exception here shortly, but beside for that, it's going to be 7+ years of looking for any secluded place that he can find, hiding out, trying not to get detected, trying to fly under the radar of Saul and his men just in order to try to stay alive. But as far as Jonathan is concerned, first things are first, let David know, give David a warning so that he is prepared for what may come his way. He needs to know that his life is in jeopardy. I suspect it was already pretty obvious to David. You know, Saul had already launched 2 spears at David to try to pin him to the wall. I think David probably suspected something when Saul kept sending him out on impossible missions, suicide missions, not expecting David to come back, but David would come back. I think David's probably had a pretty good understanding for a while now that something is a little off with that dude. I think Saul wants to kill me. And now all of those, if they were suspicions, they should have been more than that, but if they were suspicions, they are now confirmed. This is a legit insider that's giving us information. You can't be any closer to the actual source than Jonathan is, the son of Saul. So, yeah. Verse 3. Jonathan says to David, and I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak to my father about you. And if I learn anything, I will tell you. So Jonathan is informing David that he's going to prepare to have a heart-to-heart talk with his father. He's going to try to talk some sense into his dad. He's going to try to talk Saul out of seeking David's life. And in the last line of that verse, Jonathan said he's going to let David know how that conversation goes. He's going to let David know if those attempted peace talks were successful. It would not be the first time that Jonathan would have to try to talk his dad out of murdering someone. This is actually the second time that we know of. The first time, who was at risk of being murdered? Jonathan himself. You remember that? Yeah, he had to defend his own life against his father because his father had vowed to kill him. All of that was over Jonathan eating a little bit of honey during a time when Saul had declared a fast for all of the soldiers in Israel. Jonathan was able to successfully talk his dad down from that vow. He was able to successfully talk him down from killing his own son. And we will now see if he's successful in David's case. Verse 4. And Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, let not the king sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have brought good to you, only good. Verse 5, for he took his life in his hand, and he struck down the Philistine Goliath. And the Lord worked a great salvation for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Remember how happy you were, Dad, when Goliath fell at the hands of David? Well, why then will you sin against innocent blood by killing David without cause? Now, that was a great defense of David, but then David would have been a very easy guy to defend. Let's see. The greatest man maybe ever. He's the reason why we have this rally of, very positive Jewish sentiment, like we're coming alive again nationally. That's because of David. David is the reason why we're getting all of these victories over the Philistines and acquiring for ourselves, or in some cases reacquiring for ourselves, more freedom than ever. That's all David. David did all of that. Yeah, very easy guy to defend. So what's the problem here? Why would you want to kill a guy like this? Verse 6, and Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan. Saul swore, so he didn't just say this, he swore it. He took an oath on it. He swore, as the Lord lives, he, David, shall not be put to death. Now, don't get too excited about that just yet. Yes, Jonathan has managed to talk Saul down for the moment, but it is only for the moment. We know that ever since 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 14, that Saul has been tormented by an unclean spirit, a demon. And from that time forward, Saul has been wrestling that demon. And it's been somewhat easy to see that just Saul is a tormented individual. He's all over the place. That is about to become painfully obvious. Starting from this place in the scriptures and moving forward, you're going to see a very unstable Saul. You're going to see a very tormented Saul. He's going to lash out in rage in one moment. Then he'll be talked down from that rage. He'll apologize. And things will go well for a very short while until he once again lashes out in rage once again. He's just all over the place. And he's very unstable at this point, and a very dangerous man moving forward from this position in the scriptures. He's going to just continue to confirm to you that yes, he is either demon oppressed or demon possessed, depending on how you want to look at it. The guy has serious spiritual issues. Now, on the other side of that, one of the confirming signs of salvation is a sound mind. Not a tormented mind like Saul, but a sound mind. You can use as references there Luke chapter 8, verse 35, and 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. I think everyone knows 2 Timothy 1, 7. The Lord has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of a sound mind. The true Christian does not have to worry about demonic possession. They don't have to worry about an unclean spirit taking them over and controlling them, as we're seeing in this story of King Saul being demonically possessed. The true Christian does not have to worry about that. Now, it is true the true Christian is still going to have an internal battle, but that is a battle with your flesh. And you are still going to have the enemy whispering temptations into your ear. You're going to have that, but all of that is different than what Saul is going through. For you, when it comes to your salvation, if we used Matthew chapter 12, verses 43 through 45 as sort of talking points here when Jesus was discussing the casting out of unclean spirits, your salvation kind of worked like this. When the Lord saved you, what he first did was he emptied you, and then he swept you, and then he put your house in order. And he didn't just leave you empty. Jesus said that's where you get into problems, right? He didn't just leave you empty, but the Holy Spirit moved in. The Holy Spirit came to dwell within you. And here's one promise you can take from the Lord, that when the Holy Spirit lives in you, he is not going to share rooms with an unclean spirit. As a Christian, you are safe. You are protected from demonic possession. The result of that is a sound mind, not a harassed and tormented mind. Remember the demoniac from the Gadarenes? When Jesus found him, this man was possessed by unclean spirits, and Jesus found him naked, living among the tombs. He was sort of obsessed with the death culture. Maybe moving forward, we should call this guy the goth from the Gadarenes. And when Jesus was done with this man, he was seated, clothed, and in his right mind. The Lord took away all of that torment, all of that lack of control, that control that had been given over to unclean spirits. Jesus gave all of that back to this individual. That is not just one man's salvation experience. That is every person's salvation experience. The Lord's Spirit in us is a protection and, of course, a procurement of future status with the Lord, eternal life with Him. So the Christian is safe. Saul is a different breed here. He's built different. He's in a different situation. He's living in a different time period. And he is a very troubled and tormented individual. Verse 7. Verse 7. And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan reported to him all these things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before. So they're trying this again. And we understand this from Jonathan's perspective. This is his dad. He's going to give his dad the benefit of the doubt. He is going to continue to hold out hope that there is a chance for the redemption of his father. But David might want to leave his armor on as he's now once again hanging out in the palace around King Saul, because you never know when Saul is going to go off again. That top was easily popped. He is just, from zero to fit of rage like that. So David's going to have to be careful, and it's not going to last very long. Verse 8, and there was war again, and David went out and fought with the Philistines and struck them with a great blow so that they fled before him. So David is right back where he was. He's in the palace. A war has happened again. There's another battle with the Philistines. Saul was okay long enough to send David out into that battle. David is one of Saul's soldiers again. It sounds like David is even once again leading other soldiers. For certain, he is again a standout victor in a battle against the Philistines, as always. And maybe that opened up old wounds for Saul. Maybe Saul was thinking back to when he was sending David on those suicide missions against impossible odds, trying to get David killed, but nothing would work. David always came back as a victor, and here he is again. Once again, David is a victor in a battle. He's winning again. So instead of Saul being happy for Israel's success, he is jealous and furious over David's success. Verse 9. Then a harmful spirit from the Lord, a demon permitted by the Lord, came upon Saul. That means that this demon has now taken active control of Saul again. As he sat in his house with his spear in his hand, and David was playing the lyre. I think we all know what's coming here, don't we? We've been down this road before. Verse 10. And Saul sought to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he, David, eluded Saul so that he struck the spear into the wall. And you can almost hear the spear going in your head, right? You get those mental and internal audio images and sounds, right? Stuck the spear into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. So here we go again. This is the third spear that has been flung at David. This is now the third time that David has had to duck a spear in order to stay alive. So maybe you're wondering, well, where is the Lord in all of this? Poor David, he was minding his own business as a shepherd, just out there doing shepherd stuff, and the Lord came, and the Lord decided to replace a king who would not want to be replaced and would not go easy, and make him, David, the new king. And now here's David going through all of this trouble. He's saving his own life, it seems, having to duck spears. And we're wondering, where is the Lord in all of this? Why didn't the Lord, take control of the spear and flick it far left or flick it far right? Why didn't we see the obvious hand of God in this? Well, why didn't he flick it far left or far right? Maybe he wasn't in the mood to make a political statement at the time. I don't know. But I think probably what's happening here is that the Lord decided that he was going to let David handle as much as David could handle in all of this, and then just step in when he was actually needed. God does that, right? That confuses Christians all the time. They feel like they are doing it all, and they are not seeing the Lord coming through as often and as obvious as they would like him to. But this is the way that the Lord works. He works in cooperation with us. We're a partner with him in this. He's always going to want us to do as much as we can. And his promise is always that where we end, that's where he picks up, and that's where he takes over. So I think the Lord's message to us would be that when we can duck, God expects us to duck. And when he's actually needed, he'll show up. And there's no doubt about that. He'll come through for you. If you find yourself upset that God didn't intervene in some difficult situation in your life, just ask yourself this question: did you die? And if you're asking that question, unless you're on your way to heaven at the time when you're asking the question, that means you did not die. So you're fine. You made it. You survived. You did what you had to, and you didn't die. So you can't have a beef with the Lord in that case, right? If you actually needed him, if you couldn't handle it yourself, he would have been there, and he would have come through for you. He would have stepped in. So I guess I would say this to you tonight: don't get mad when the Lord trusts you with some of the workload. You should be honored by that. If there's a certain extent of the workload that I can handle without the Lord having to, I'm trying to train myself not to say having. I don't know why I say having. It's not good English. Without the Lord having to miraculously intervene or divinely intervene, then that's a great honor, and you should feel blessed by that. Verse 11. Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch him. So they want to make sure that David does not leave the palace on this day, and here's why: that he might kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, told him, she tells David here, David, if you do not escape with your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed. So I shared with you before that when Saul said, I know how to get David real good, I'm going to have him marry my daughter, he wasn't saying that because his daughter was the most awful person on the planet. As you can see, she's not the most awful person on the planet. She's got some good qualities. She does some good things. She does wrong things too. We're going to get to that. But first and foremost, she really loves David. We know that. Here she is supporting David. She's choosing David over her own father. This is an act of betrayal against family, against the king of Israel, no less. But she's doing that because it's the right thing to do, and that's got to count for something, I think. She warns David, David, you've got to be gone by morning. If you're not gone by morning, you're going to be gone in the morning. Dead? Anyone out there? Is this thing on? Verse 12, so Michal let David down through the window because the servants of Saul, they are watching the door. Either they don't realize that Michal knew that this was going on, or if she knew, that she wouldn't be the kind of person that would betray the king and actually tell David. Whatever the reason, they do not expect David to find out about this plan. If they thought there was any chance that David would find out about this plan, I guarantee you they would have watched the window too. But they're not expecting him to crawl out the window in the middle of the night. They're watching the door, and they're going to pounce in the morning. It says, and he, David, fled away and escaped. So you can add that to the list. If you can duck, then God expects you to duck. Now this time we're going to add this one. If you can climb out the window, then the Lord is going to expect you to climb out the window. I think the Apostle Paul would agree with that statement, because in Acts chapter 9, verses 23 through 25, Paul had to be lowered down out a window through the side of the wall in a basket in order to try to get away from the Jews in Damascus that wanted to kill him. And I think if Paul could give you advice, his advice would be this: pray for the Lord to protect and deliver you, but if there's a window nearby, take advantage of it. If you found a basket, use it. Do whatever you can after you've prayed. You do whatever you can, and then trust the Lord with the rest. That is exactly what David did here in verse 12. And the reason I know that is because David actually wrote a song about it. This is Psalm chapter 59. Check this out. I'll just read the first 4 verses to you. Psalm chapter 59, verses 1 through 4. It says this, to the choir master, according to Do Not Destroy, so that's the tune that this song is supposed to be sung in, a miktam of David when Saul sent men to watch his house in order to kill him. So David wrote a song about this night, about this story that we're studying, and here's what he said. Deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Protect me from those who rise up against me. Deliver me from those who work evil, and save me from bloodthirsty men. For behold, they lie in wait for my life. Fierce men stir up strife against me. For no transgression or sin of mine, O Lord. For no fault of mine, they run and make ready. Awake, come to meet me. And see. So there you have it. David was praying for God to show up that night, and at the same time, he was climbing out the window to escape and run for his life. That's a perfect picture of what I think the Christians should get as modern advice from the Lord. Pray to the Lord, trust in him, and then get your carcass in gear and do whatever you can. Just do what you can and trust the Lord with the rest. He will manage his part. If his part is needed, he'll manage his part. Verse 13, Michal took an image and laid it on the bed and put a pillow of goat's hair at its head and covered it with the clothes. So you see what she's doing here, right? She was trying to make it look like David was sick in bed because she knows the men are out there watching the door, and then in the morning they're going to be barging in to grab David and take him back to Saul for execution. The Hebrew word for image here is teraphim. Teraphim. And usually, honestly, almost always, I think, that word refers to an idol of a false god. So the immediate question would be, what is Michal, the daughter of Saul, doing with an idol of a false god? And you could ask a second question, why is David allowing his wife to have an image, an idol, to a false god? For me, the answer to that question is that David would not allow that. I don't think David would stand for that. So I do believe there is a chance that this is not an idol to a false god, but rather just a statue. And if I know Saul, it would be a statue of Saul in the palace there. Probably had lots of them. But yes, it is quite possible, I will admit, that Michal did have an idol to a false god there in their living quarters. About the only thing that we know for sure here about this teraphim is that it was life-sized. It was a life-sized statue. And the reason we know that is because it's going to fool Saul's men into thinking that David is sick in bed in just a moment here. Okay, so let's keep reading verse 14. And when Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, he is sick. So it's now the next morning, right? David is long gone. He left during the night at some point. The men are just now coming in to get David on that next day in the morning to take him to execution. And Michal is now lying to protect David. Why is she doing that? He left in the night. He's long gone. Why is she doing that? It's because she knows there's going to be a manhunt. Now, this is conjecture, but let's face it. It's because she knows there's going to be a manhunt. And any minute that she can spare David is another minute that he has to get away, get further out. And in human terms, that's a greater and greater chance for David to actually be able to escape his pursuers and have no one be able to catch up to him. Michal's goat hair statue here under the covers is actually pretty convincing because these men of Saul, they totally buy it. They're like, wow, Michal, you're right. I've never seen David look this bad. He looks real bad. Are you sure he's not dead? He looks a little stiff. They buy it and they're like, whatever it is that David has, we don't want to catch it. So let's go. Let's leave David sick in bed. Let's go back and report this to Saul. Verse 15. Then Saul sent the messengers to see David, saying, bring him up to me in the bed, that I may kill him. I don't care if he's sick. I don't care if he's bedridden. Bring the whole bed. I think Saul's men saw this as an inopportune time to seize David. The guy's sick. It's not the moment, but Saul viewed it otherwise. Saul viewed it as the opportune time to take David. And if you were a person of no compassion whatsoever, you'd agree with him. That's the perfect time to kill your very elusive enemy. He's bedridden. Just bring the whole bed in. And if David's bedridden and you get him there in the palace, well, there's a greater chance that Saul's finally going to be able to get that spear through David. So that's the way that Saul is thinking. And then maybe, you could even use his sickness as an excuse. Like David was so sick that by the time we found him, rigor mortis was already setting in. There was nothing we could do for him. We're going to miss him. Thoughts and prayers to family and friends. I don't know, just a thought. Verse 16. And when the messengers came in, behold, the image was in the bed, with the pillow of goat's hair at its head. So obviously the gig is up now. The soldiers know that David is not in the bed. This is a stiff. And David is obviously MIA. So verse 17, Saul said to Michal, why have you deceived me thus and let my enemy go so that he has escaped? And Michal answered Saul, he, David, said to me, let me go. Why should I kill you? Or in other words, please don't make me have to kill you. So Michal has lied to the soldiers. Now she is lying to her father. Michal is a big, fat liar, and not a very accomplished one at that. Now, don't get me wrong. I know there's no such thing as a good lie, but this is probably about the worst lie that she could have possibly told. Like, yeah, sorry, I had no choice. David told me that if I didn't let him go, he was going to kill me, so I had to let him go, Dad. She had all night to come up with a good lie, and that's what she went with. Really? That's pretty bad, because you know what that's going to do, right? These two in-laws, they're already outlaws. Things are already bad between Saul and David. She just made it worse. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter because Saul's planning on killing David. I guess it really doesn't get much worse than that. But his anger's worse. His desire to kill David is worse now because terrible, terrible lie. Verse 18. Now David fled and escaped, and he came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and lived at Naioth. Isn't it cool to be reading about our guy Samuel again? Samuel and Saul parted ways quite a while ago, and the biblical narrative has followed Saul. So it has been a very long time since we have read about Samuel or heard anything from him. He would be in his 80s at this point. And who better to run to at a time like this than Samuel? No one was closer to this story than Samuel. Not only did Samuel know that the Lord had rejected Saul from being king over Israel and that God had chosen for David to be the king, but he was the guy that delivered those messages. He was the guy that gave the message to Saul and then symbolized it with the ripping of the cloth, right? And he was the guy that went and selected David and then anointed him with the oil to be the king. So this would be a good spiritual man that you could run to at a time like this, and for sure a guy that would be sympathetic to David in his situation. Verse 19, and it was told Saul, behold, David is at Naioth in Ramah. I wish we knew who the leaker and the squeaker was here. Someone let this cat out of the bag. I don't know how he found this out. I mean, this was a pretty private thing. David is now staying with Samuel in Naioth. That's like a completely secret thing because as we read and as we know, Samuel's from Ramah, so Samuel's left home. He's taken David off to a secure location. Somehow there's a leak, there's a mole, I don't know. Saul's got surveillance cameras everywhere. Something's happening. Saul finds out, and now we get to see what God can do when one of his servants are in actual danger and they cannot defend themselves. We got to see what David could do a couple times. We got to see David rescuing himself, delivering himself. Now we're going to get to see what the Lord can do for David. Verse 20, then Saul sent messengers to take David, and when they saw the company of the prophets prophesying, and Samuel standing as heads over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. So it appears that Samuel, in his semi-retirement, has founded and then run a seminary for prophets, basically a school for people who would be trained in the word of prophecy. And he wouldn't be the last of the Old Testament prophets to do something like that. We read multiple occasions where the scriptures allude to Elijah and Elisha being involved in a similar thing. These seminaries that were set up that would offer training to people that had received a call from God to be in prophetic ministries. Now, I don't think it was formal. I use the word seminary, but I doubt they were handing out degrees in prophetic services, an ABS, an associate's, a bachelor's, a master's, a doctor's. But they were getting training by these prominent prophets. Samuel, in this case, he's leading this one. Elijah and Elisha leading one in the future. And when Saul's soldiers showed up, those prophets under Samuel's tutelage, they're just, whatever, out there in the courtyard enjoying a lunch break or what have you, and the Spirit of God comes upon them, and they begin to prophesy. And that's not weird. That's totally normal. Prophets are going to prophesy. That's what prophets do. And they probably got an A+ for the day. Good job. You guys are doing great. You're letting the Lord speak through you. That's what we were just covering the last couple weeks. Samuel, I'm sure, was proud of them. But what was highly unusual was what followed, and that was Saul's soldiers who have come to arrest and ultimately kill David. The Spirit of God comes upon them, and they begin to prophesy the word of the Lord as well. Now, that does not mean they got saved. The Lord doesn't force save anyone. Like, all right, look, I'm just done with you being unsaved. Boom, there's the Holy Spirit. You're saved now. Congratulations. The Lord doesn't do that. They're not saved. It's not that. It's just that the Lord is showing here that when he determines to do a thing, he can do a thing. And no one can resist him when he chooses to work and when he chooses to speak. God just used them, that's all. God has spoken prophecy through more than one unbeliever in the Bible. We had Caiaphas in the New Testament. I mean, if you want to get even outside of the human realm, God even used a donkey to prophesy, to speak to a servant. So the Lord can just do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, through whoever he wants. The big question is, what were they prophesying? Again, like as a Bible student, I have all these questions. Lord, I want more. I want to know more. I want to know what the prophets were prophesying. In Samuel's school for the prophetically inclined or what have you. I want to know what they were prophesying. But I especially want to know what Saul's servants were prophesying. We have no way of knowing. But I can assure you it wasn't pro-Saul. If I had to put money on this, which I won't, I'm not a betting man, but I would put my money on this being a very pro-David speech that the Lord was giving through these servants, because as you're going to see, when they prophesy, it just wrecks everything for them. They're no longer going to even attempt to capture David. After they prophesy, that's it. They tuck tail and they turn to cover. They go back to Saul to report it. So listen to this, verse 21. When it was told Saul, he sent other messengers, another batch, and they also prophesied. Again, I'm guessing pro-David, anti-Saul. But we're not done. And Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they also prophesied. Wow, business was booming for Samuel's School for the Prophets here. Seminary registrations through the roof, probably thinking about adding a new wing for unbelieving prophetic students, because there's a lot of them lately. Unbelievers showing up and prophesying the word of the Lord. 3 waves of Saul's men have come for the sole purpose of capturing David, and then the Spirit of God hits them. They prophesy and would not touch David. They just went back empty-handed. They told Saul what happened. Yeah, we were going to grab him, but wow, God. That's our story. Wow, God. Verse 22, then he himself, Saul, went to Ramah and came to the great well that is in Scorched-Earth. So Saul thought, if you want something done and you want it done right, then you got to do it yourself. Saul's going to do this himself. I keep sending batches of men, and they're like converted temporarily. So I'm just going to go do this myself. And he asked in Ramah, where are Samuel and David? And one said, behold, they are at Naioth in Ramah. Verse 23. And he went there to Naioth in Ramah, and the Spirit of God came upon him also. Saul now, we're talking. Spirit of God came upon him also, and as he went, he prophesied until he came to Naioth in Ramah. Did you get that? He goes to Ramah, like, town square there at the well. He asks a guy, hey, where's Samuel? Samuel's not where he normally is. Where's Samuel and David? Guy gives him directions or whatever. And for the rest of the leg of that journey from where he was at that well to Naioth, Saul is prophesying the whole time. He can't help himself. Verse 24. Here's where it gets weird. Wouldn't be a Wednesday night if it didn't. And he too stripped off his clothes. Wait a second. Hold on. He too stripped off his clothes? Who else has stripped off their clothes? We didn't read about anyone else stripping off their clothes. We didn't know about that. Well, but see, now we do. We've just been given more information. The Lord wasn't just taking these batches of Saul's men and having them prophesy. He was also having them do so naked. And he has just done the same thing with the king of Israel, Saul. Saul is prophesying from Scorched-Earth to Naioth naked. And he too prophesied before Samuel and lay naked all that day and all that night. Thus it is said, is Saul also among the prophets? Okay, first of all, it is obvious why the Lord would prophesy through Saul and all of his men. They most certainly needed a better message on their lips than, hey, let's go get David and kill him. But why did the Lord cause them to do it naked? And the answer is, and it's going to sound like a joke or a pun, but it really isn't. The answer is that this is symbolic of God showing that he is exposing Saul and all of his men. He's exposing them and he's embarrassing them. And I just got to add that it couldn't have happened to a better bunch of guys. A deserving bunch of guys. The Lord had to let them all know who was in charge, that it was not Saul. That God could have total control even over the king of Israel, Saul, at any time if he wanted. Saul, even the king, was not strong enough to withstand God, because the truth is, no one is. But this is, in fact, a temporary takeover of Saul, because God knew Saul's heart. He knew that Saul's heart was not after God, that his heart was after self. He knew that Saul did not want to love the Lord. He knew that Saul did not want to receive the words of the Lord and then obey them. And so ultimately, the Lord was going to leave Saul to the godless future that he desired. But for the time being, the Lord was making a statement. And oh man, it just eats me up to not know what they were prophesying. I have to come back to that. It's driving me nuts. What did he have them prophesying nakedly? I got to know. When I get to heaven, I got to see this on rewind. I got to see this moment. I just, Saul running around public naked, probably like with David for King speeches. David for King, David for King, David, he's our man. Out with the trash. In with a man after God's own heart. I got to know what he's saying, but I guess I'm going to have to wait for heaven. I bet it was good, though. I bet it was good. God is the best at vengeance, and that's why he tells us to leave vengeance to him. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. When the Lord is the avenger in a situation of vengeance, it's always just right. It's never overdone or underdone, and that's where we get off and make the wrong decisions when we take vengeance on ourselves. Without a doubt, we're going to do one of the two. We're going to underdo it or we're going to overdo it. I'm going to overdo it. I don't know about you. I'll just let you know right, truthfully off the top here. I would overdo it. The Lord does it just perfectly. He's the righteous judge. And before we close, that last expression there, that expression has returned. Is Saul also among the prophets? You remember that phrase, that idiom, that Hebrew expression that first came to us in 1 Samuel chapter 10, verses 11 and 12, because that was the first time that Saul prophesied. This is not Saul's first rodeo here. He has actually prophesied with the Spirit of the Lord on him before. This is now the second time that he's prophesied. The first time he prophesied, the public at large was so shocked by it that they were like, are you serious? Saul's a prophet now? Saul can prophesy, and they made this statement, and they were using this statement as an expression throughout the nation. Is Saul also among the prophets? And what that meant was, if God can take a man that has no spiritual inclinations whatsoever, has no desire to be spiritual, has no desire to do what the Lord would want him to do or say what the Lord would want him to say, if God can take a man like that and speak through him, well then, reckon God can take anyone at any time and say or do anything that he wants to through them. That was the message of that expression, and it's given to us again. And once again, it's true. We know that throughout the Scriptures. God does not have to reserve speaking through only his servants. God will get his message across in any way that he chooses for his purposes, and he's perfect at it. He's perfect at it. So we get this expression again. The nation is confused once again. What's with Saul? He's prophesying. Did you know that Saul liked David this much? You hear the stuff he's saying about David?